Trade deadline season is upon us, and really it's no secret as to what the Mariners need to be looking for. But Jerry Dipoto actually revealed the Mariners trade deadline plan on 710 Seattle Sports, and honestly, what he had to say was really surprising to me. We know the issues, right? We know that the starting pitching has been really, really good, and the offense has been pretty damn bad. And the Mariners, who currently sit at 4th place in the American League West, yeah, they know it too. Struggling players like Teoscar Hernandez or Eugenio Suarez, even Jose Caballero starting to struggle. Colton Wong has struggled a lot this season. Yeah, it's pretty obvious that the Mariners offense is their biggest concern. But when it comes to the trade deadline, if you're the Mariners, you can only really trade for what's available. And we all know that Jerry Depoto, Trader Jerry, is going to find what's available and try to access every single avenue to make this team better. Last year, the Mariners acquired Luis Castillo. Of course, Castillo was a huge bonus to this team. So what could 2023's trade deadline have in store for us? There are multiple parts to this Jerry Depoto interview, so let's take a listen to what he said about what he's looking for at this trade deadline and then go from there.
We do have an idea, and as we talked about through the off season, we will go into the trade deadline part of this season looking for a bat wherever that bat might fit, and it's positionally is you can't really focus on positions, and especially in July, that's very difficult to do. You don't know who's going to be available or what, so we'd like to create length in our lineup.
So in the first little blurb, Depoto talks about how you can't really focus on a position, a specific position. For example, obviously, second base has been a big position of need for the Seattle Mariners, but when it comes to the trade deadline, you have to work with what's available, and if there's no premier second baseman available, you still need to lengthen this lineup. Depoto said that the lineup needs to be better. Obviously, offense is the problem, so adding some sort of bat, whether it be at second base or even in the outfield, it needs to happen if you're the Seattle Mariners. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know any inkling of what the Mariners could be looking for during this trade deadline. If we're looking at second baseman that could be available, maybe a Tim Anderson could scoot over to second base, or Ha-Sung Kim. There are definitely options out there, but how much of those options are actually attainable by the Mariners? What are teams going to be asking for, and are they even willing to trade these players? We just won't know. But because the Mariners won't be looking at just a specific position, it kind of broadens the options for them. And they also talked about how it doesn't matter if a guy's on an expiring contract or not. Obviously, the Mariners want to go out, and if they're going to spend their prospect capital, they want to spend it on players that are going to be with the team for quite some time. Think about the Luis Castillo deal. They obviously knew they were going to get Castillo for the rest of 2022 and then 2023. Of course, he then signed the extension with the Mariners, which means he's under contract for the rest of eternity. But the Mariners were willing to give up the prospect capital that they did for an extra year of Luis Castillo. In an ideal situation, you're not going to be going out and giving up Brian Wu, Harry Ford, etc. for a guy who's going to be a free agent in just a couple of months. And Depoto talked a little bit about guys on expiring contracts and what it means if the Mariners start to play better or if they start to play worse, what it means for the trade deadline in this next little blurb here.
What can this team do in the next couple of weeks or however long it is before you make a decision on that to affect your decision making? If they play better, do you go bigger? I mean, does that change the way you might act at or before the deadline?
No, I think you see it, with Luis Castillo, and I'm not sure you can go bigger than The Rock at the deadline. And we did that a year ago. And I think that is more representative of our mindset, is that when we go big for players that we feel like are going to be here for a sustained period of time. And in Luis's case, we talked about this. Minimally, we were getting the 2022 season and 2023, and we thought we had the chance to keep him here, and that wound up being the case. We'll again focus on players like that in the available veteran crew. We won't. I guess we won't turn our eyes from the expiring contracts, potential free agents. We're just unlikely to view that as the big get. Pouring it out for a short-term rental player doesn't make sense for us, just in terms of how we build our roster or philosophically. So think more like if it's big, it's going to be a player that's sustainable. If not, we'll try to do those small, I guess, under the hood type trades that wind up being a lot better than you think, and adding. But anything is open to us right now simply because we know what we want to do to get better. We just have to find the right dance partner to do it.
Dipoto does note that they're not going to spend a bunch of their prospect capital on guys on expiring contracts. They'll be more under the hood moves like, hey, we added a bench bat that can help us in this situation, instead of going out and spending all of your prospect capital, including Harry Ford, Cole Young, etc., on like Nelson Cruz, for example, who will be a free agent at the end of the year. And don't get me wrong, there are guys on expiring contracts that make a lot of sense. Again, Carlos Santana, Nelson Cruz, kind of veteran guys that can fill a DH role and possibly play an outfield position for you. Those guys do exist. Preferably someone who hits left-handed. The Mariners lineup is pretty right-handed heavy at the moment, but someone that can hit left-handed and do some damage at the bottom of your lineup, or even somewhere in the middle of your lineup, that'll make these guys that much better. The most fun part of this entire interview is Jerry Dipoto saying that there are guys that they'll look at that you really wouldn't think would be moved. Obviously, there's always that traditional like list of players that could be moved at the trade deadline, but Jerry Dipoto says that they'll always be looking at guys who probably don't make that list for most people, that you wouldn't think are going to get moved at the deadline. Depoto said sometimes they come to fruition and sometimes they don't.
Do you think, and I know it's early, but, you know, we sort of, I think, have a sense of who the veteran bats who only have, you know, a half year left of club control are. Do you have a sense as to whether or not there will be those other sort of Luis Castillo equivalents in the market this year?
There always are. You know, they're the rental bats, you know, the guys who are pending free agents, and those are fairly easy to see. There'll be a list of them that come out on everybody's rankings, you know, between now and July, from anywhere from MLB Network to ESPN and the like. We tend to focus on the players on that list that have a little bit more control. We also have a fair bit of conversation with clubs about players that you might not think are as available as clubs are willing to make them for the right returns. And those are the trades that we generally spend more of our time on. And sometimes they come to fruition and sometimes they don't. But, you know, we tend to spend a little bit more of our time focusing on what this does for the Mariners in 2023 and moving forward, because, you know, what we are attempting to build, and I think the foundation we've laid is suggestive of, is that we want this to be the long game. We want to win year in and year out, and we feel like we're on the right path to do that.
We're still over a month away from the MLB trade deadline, but the Mariners are going to be adding a few more pieces back to their roster that are going to make this team so much better. I have that video on the screen now. Go ahead and check that one out. Appreciate you guys watching this one, and go Mariners.